All right, hey, we're going to hit the Middle Ages here. I got a fairly lengthy PowerPoint, but I think we can get through it relatively fast. So we just ended with the Byzantines and the Islamic, the birth of Islam, but we're going back to Europe during this time frame. You have these Germanic tribes that are going to live in north and east of modern day France, kind of into the Germany, Poland, Russia area, right? This European steppe. And these tribes over time are going to take over different parts of Europe, and some of them are going to be conquered by the Romans and be assimilated into Roman culture, and then others are going to be on the outside. And so as we move into, I don't know, the late 300s, early 400s CE, the Huns, like Attila the Hun and the predecessors of the Mongols, start to press these Germanic tribes further and further west as their territories decrease. And so if you think of it kind of as like like you have the line of Roman civilization, and then just east of that line, those people are going to be kind of softened by the Roman civilization, and then the tribes that are a little bit further east and a little bit further east are going to be a little bit more war ready and warrior like or barbarian like. And so as the Huns start to push everybody west, the stronger tribes or the more warlike tribes are going to conquer the eastern tribes, and those tribes are those western tribes, and so those tribes are going to try to get into the Roman civilization. And that's going to be one of the things that's going to lead to the fall of Rome in 476 as these tribes get pushed further and further in. All right. And so somewhere around 400, the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths and the Lambrids, they're going to start to move into Italy. They're going to start to move into different areas as the Western Roman Empire loses power. They're going to start to give land masses to these these tribes, trying to keep them happy. And the Franks are going to reconquer much of Gaul, which is France, and the Vandals are going to push into northern Africa and Spain. And all of these tribes are fierce warriors, barbarian types. They're going to think of early Vikings, right? They're going to worship Odin and Thor and gods of war and victory, right? And they're going to train their kids very early on at young ages with spears and shields and swords. And when they go to battle, they're much like the much like the Spartans, where they're told like they're either return with your shield or return on your shield, right? Because if you would lose one or the other, it was a great loss of honor. And so these chieftains, these warrior chiefs, these warlords are going to lead tribes and these people. And the two greatest, are the ones that are going to have the largest impacts, I suppose, are going to be Odoacer and Theodoric the Great. Sorry. Odoacer is actually the one that's going to overthrow the Western Empire. And he's not the first tribe to sack Rome, but he's the first one to sack Rome and stay. And so in 476, he topples the Western Roman Empire, and Odoacer declares himself king of all of Italy. But he doesn't recognize the Roman emperor that's still in Constantinople. And so, you had Rome was split between East and West. And so now West has fallen to these Germanic tribes, but Odoacer refuses to recognize him. And the emperor of Constantinople at that time is Zeno. And so Zeno is having a hard enough time just keeping control of Constantinople at this time. And so, he's going to face threats from other Germanic tribes, like the Ostrogoths, who are led by Theodoric the Great. And so Theodoric the Great, he's he has Constantinople besieged, and Zeno is like, hey, I have a deal for you. If you leave Constantinople alone, I'll allow you to go conquer Italy, and you can be king of all of Italy, and it will be really cool. And so Theodoric the Great does, and he goes and he takes over almost the entirety of Italy, and so Odoacer has to create some kind of a peace to hold on to any kind of guise of power, and so that he makes this deal with Theodoric, and so Theodoric invites Odoacer to this great feast, and they're gonna eat to their good fortune. And during the dinner, Theodoric pulls out a sword, he cuts Odoacer across the collarbone, and you know, in true like melodramatic fashion, Odoacer calls out, "Where's God? You know, how could this offense come upon me?" And then Theodoric responds, "Well, this is what you did to my friends," and he kills him. And so Theodoric the Great becomes the king of Italy, and he's going to lead this group of Ostrogoths and Visigoths and Franks and all these people for, you know, his lifetime or whatever. And so you can see a little bit of the instability that's going to creep into Europe during the Middle Ages during this time frame. You're going to have, over time, you're going to have a couple of really strong leaders, but nothing that's really going to unify anything outside of there's no unifying force on culture for Europe during the Middle Ages from 500 CE to roughly 1500. So you're looking at maybe 1,000 years, maybe 750 years, depending on when you want to draw these lines. Outside of there's no unifying factors outside of the Catholic Church, and so the Church at one point, Rome kind of ran the infrastructure and the society and marriage licenses and all that stuff. They dealt with the day-to-day bureaucracy of everything. But then as the Roman Empire falls, the church is kind of left alone, and so no longer is it just an institution that's out there to save your soul, but it also becomes a political, becomes a very powerful social institution for the church as well. And they realize kind of their power, and well, as the church realizes the power it has, some of these Germanic tribes, the chieftains, start to realize that, hey, you know what, I can unify large groups of people around this idea of religion. And so Clovis the First is the first pagan king of the Franks. He's kind of, think of him kind of as a pseudo king of France, and he decides that he's going to convert to Christianity, and that's going to cause a lot of the other Germanic tribes to start to move that way as well. And so that's going to further bolster the power of the Catholic Church, because Rome during that time is the center of the Western world, and the Pope, the bishop that's in Rome, becomes the Pope, and he becomes the head of the church, and he starts to take on this added importance, not only for religion, but also for starting to unify these groups of people. And in 380 CE, when Constantine, I guess Constantine before that in the 280s allows for, or the 200s allows for Christianity to exist, and then by 380 Christianity becomes the religion of Rome, and then the Pope, he's still kind of secondary to the emperor, but with the fall of the Western Empire, the Pope becomes the most powerful man in Western Europe, and there's this power struggle between the Pope and the Byzantine emperors in Constantinople, that's going to lead to a chasm in the church, or a split in the church at some time. All right, so there we go. We have different kings that come about. You have King Otto, who is part of the what's going to become the Holy Roman Empire, what's going to be led by Constantine. But Otto is one of the early Francas, East Franca, which is going to be like, think of it modern day Germany for lack of a better part. And he's going to help the Pope, like he's going to lead his armies and help. And so like on Christmas Day of 961, Leo crowns Otto the Roman emperor, and so Otto's going to control most of Central Europe, and he's German, and his heirs are going to be as well. And so this Holy Roman Empire becomes like second in power to the Byzantines, because the Pope is going to lean on the Holy Roman Empire to find his military arm his military power, and the Holy Roman Empire will rely on the Pope for its claim to for religion, and so it's kind of helping either or. But like the empire really has nothing to do with the church, and it's definitely not Roman. It's gonna be German, whatever. And so a lot of the Holy Roman emperors, though, they see themselves as protectorates of the church. And when things go bad, you have kings in France or emperors, Holy Roman emperors in Europe that will have conflicts with popes, and so it's not that uncommon for popes to be taken off of the throne and put in with put in with someone that's more acceptable to these kings. But at the same time that we have this power struggle going on, we have this idea of Christendom that pops up. and it's just basically based on this idea that all these nations that take on this idea of Christianity kind of share a similar religion. They share similar ideas and assumptions, similar to the way that the Greeks in their city states, they were all individual city states, but they were all still Greeks. And so like even though you have like you're starting to see the development of places like France and Spain and the Holy Roman Empire that will one day become Germany and Italy and England's starting to get their stuff together a little bit during this time frame. You see these people that are these nations that are separate and they still fight each other, but yet they still, when they're opposed by an outside force, that they will unify. And we'll see that with the Crusades, and you also see that with the threat of the Mongol invasion that the book does a nice job talking about in the 1300s when the Mongols start to press down on Europe. Christendom unites and tries to fight back, and to be honest, it would have gone very poorly for the Christians if they would have gone into full scale battle with the Mongols. But luckily, for the Christians at that time, the Khan Ogadai passes away and causes the Mongols to retreat. And so this idea of Christendom and the spreading of religion and culture is going to be a dominant factor within the Middle Ages, right? We have the Reconquista, which is in Spain. Spain was kind of divided between Christian forces and Muslim forces that had come from North Africa into Europe, and they'd been stopped by the Franks at the Battle of Tours. But the Muslim governments are still there, and there's still Muslims that are in Spain, and so there's a call that goes out, kind of an early crusade, if you will, asking for help from other knights around Christendom to come and get rid of to get rid of Muslims in Spain. And so European knights that maybe didn't have a land to themselves, or didn't have a big enough land vassal, or there's like nobility, maybe you have like third or fourth born sons into a noble family that aren't going to get land, and this call out from Spain to get rid of Muslim holdings in Spain and reconquer that land for Christendom becomes very, very attractive for people. And so some knights would move to Spain as ways to find their own land. In the 800s you have Charlemagne that comes about, and the Pope crowned Charlemagne Holy Roman Emperor, just like just like Otto, and you see that this precedent, this connection again between the Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire, but also just the power that the Holy Roman Empire is going to wield with Constantine, who's going to oversee Europe for like a 50-year period of time, is going to bring about tremendous change with education and the push to try to put Latin into the educational sources in the church, right? And so we have that. Kind of skip through here. Charlemagne's Charlemagne's interesting in the fact that he conquers a large portion of Europe, or the people that were kind of maybe anybody that was not in favor with the church. But you can kind of see here by 800, Charlemagne rules, France and Switzerland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and into Spain. And so he's going to rule really alongside the Pope during this time frame. And so learning had not been all that important from the fall of Rome for a 400-year period of time. And so Charlemagne starts to strengthen not only the power of the church, but also the power of nobility in England. And he starts to he starts to bring about a new interest in learning that's going to blossom, a couple hundred years later with the Renaissance, which we'll get to next unit here. Charlemagne, there we go. Okay, when much like when any of the other influential leaders of the Middle Ages dies, when Charlemagne passes away, nobody can really fill his shoes, and so his empire falls into disrepair for a period, and or for forever really, and the popes and the kings are gonna fight for power, and so this is going to result in this idea of feudalism, or the growth of feudalism across Europe, because kings are going to need food, and people are going to need land, and so we see with the growth of feudalism, we see the loss of rights. So you see the increase of serfdom, which it ties people to the land. You see increased taxation through grains and that. And you see that. And so the rights of justices were courts did not have to answer to royal authority. And so you go there. Feudalism is just this idea of is land ownership. And so so if you think of a pyramid, the king kind of oversees all the land in this area, and he gives certain nobles land in exchange for promises of security or whatever, right? And underneath those nobles, you're going to have vassals or knights that are going to oversee a smaller area of land that's given to them by nobles, and then the serfs or the peasants are going to be on the bottom, and they're going to either belong to the land or belong to themselves and pay rent on the land to either the knights or the nobles. Everything goes up, and so in exchange for that land, the vassals or the knights would agree to fight, and then the people would grow crops, and they would be taxed, and they couldn't leave their land without permission. And so they're really kind of tied to this land. They're not property in the chattel system of slavery like that's going to be practiced in North America, but they are tied to the land in one way or another. So they're not freemen. And so that's going to exist from let's say 800s to for 200 years or so, and then all of a sudden the Crusades are going to pop about, and the Crusades aren't going to do away with the feudal system, but the Crusades are going to start this slow moving ball that's going to lead to the Renaissance as well. And so the Crusades are going to be the series of military campaigns that are going to be aimed at recapturing the Holy Land, and because you have the birth of Islam in the 600s and the spread of Islam through the Middle East and North Africa and into Spain. And so Palestine and Jerusalem, once they fall out of control of Constantinople, then they're controlled by Muslim forces. And somewhere around 1071, Christian pilgrimages stopped, and the Christians aren't allowed to come to Jerusalem anymore. And the Pope reaches out to the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire reaches out to the Pope, and he asks for help in fighting the Turks and reclaiming the Holy Land. And so you know, the Pope reaches out and to his people of France, and they recruit a sizable army to go to Jerusalem and fight. And in 1095, they're wonderfully successful. You know, they conquer Jerusalem, and they liberate you know, the Eastern Christians from the Muslim rule, and they're successful. They take Jerusalem, and they set up these little Christian empires in the Middle East, and they're successful for a short period of time, but they don't really, those empires don't grow, those Christian ideas don't really spread. And so over time, the Muslim forces regain territory, and so this Second Crusade is called out again. And they go and they try to fight the Turks, and now you have the king of France and the king of Germany come, and they take separate routes, and they fight, and they're both just soundly defeated, and you know, divided forces by with leadership that's probably not getting along, doesn't work very well. And so with this defeat of the Second Crusade, the Muslim forces in the Middle East, you know, they start to consolidate more power, and they start to grow. They start to grow faster. They start to grow, and they retake Jerusalem. And so then we have this Third Crusade where King Richard from England, you know, he leads a group of the English and the French and the Germans, and they come into the Middle East, and they win some port cities like Jaffa. But then the French and the Germans, they start to fight back home, and so they leave Richard and his English troops, and so Richard's unable to take Jerusalem. But because he's won some of the port cities, him and the Islamic leader, they create this treaty that's going to allow Christians to pilgrimage and merchants to come back to Jerusalem, but not retake the city. And then the Fourth Crusade happens in the early 1200s, and it's just a big mess. They're supposed to go to the Middle East. They end up going to Constantinople. They sack Constantinople because the Byzantines can't pay the Crusaders to continue on, and it's just a mess. And so, like, the Crusades after the Fourth Crusade just kind of fall apart. But there's other you know, there's other calls for Christian, like this idea of Christians on the warpath. We talked a little bit about the Mongol invasion of Hungary in 1241, and the call out to try to protect all Christendom from this pagan these pagan forces that are coming. And so the Crusades are successful in, I guess, allowing Christians to return back to the Holy Land. But really, the lasting legacy of the Crusades, it's going to open up trade routes between Europe and the Middle East again. And so goods from the Middle East are going to start to flow back into Europe. And not only are goods going to start to come back, but ideas are going to start to come back. And so these ideas of the Greeks and the Romans that had been floating around in the Middle East, and in Mesopotamia and in Baghdad and all of this during this time frame after the fall of the Western Roman Empire from 400 to 1200, or 400 to 1300. These ideas have been for 1,000 years have been kind of off to the side, or they've been, you know, just known by very few people. And now all of a sudden, the scholar knights that go and fight the Crusades, they come across, you know, they might come across handwritten books that are super valuable, and so of course they're going to bring them back, and so they start to read, and so these ideas start to seep back into Europe. And then, you know, you see this growth of the European population because agricultural techniques start to increase, and more food is being produced. But then, but here we have, like, the daily life of peasants is hard, you know, right? 20% of women die, and 1 out of every 5 women dies in childbirth, and 50% of your kids die before the age of 1. Typically, if you had a child, you wouldn't name them until their first birthday. So here's what's ultimately going to happen. Intellectual life is going to pick up. The Crusades are going to lead to people thinking, and so books are going to come back to monasteries, and you're going to start to see the formation of universities and forward thinking, right? Some of that's going to be from Charlemagne, some of that's going to be from the Crusades, but that's really going to start to kick off, you know, once the 1300s, 1400s come about, the invention of the printing press. But what I wanted to get with was, what we're going to end here with is this Black Death. And so in the you know, this population boom in England because of agricultural techniques improving, And then all of a sudden, for a 2-year period of time, we have just horrible crop harvest, which leads to horrible famine. And this malnutrition kind of weakens this population, where when the Black Plague or the Bubonic Plague shows up, it's going to wipe out 2/3 of the population, or half of the European population, or whatever it does. But then when Europe recovers from the Black Plague, or the Black Plague subsides for a short period of time, those agricultural techniques are still around. And so all of a sudden, Europe has a smaller population, but they can still produce a large amount of food, which is going to open up trade even more for the into the Middle East, and into the period that's going to be known as the Renaissance. And so we have the Black Death we're going to talk about in the Renaissance as well. And so you see a great population loss, but when the people that do survive through the Black Death, all of a sudden they have much more marketable skills, because you have a reduced labor force, and so you are able to negotiate for better treatment along the way. So anyways, that's going to do it for the Middle Ages. I hope we picked up something in that brief video, and I will see you guys shortly with the Renaissance. So take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.